I would rather my customers own equity in the business than these corporations or these institutions or these people who are already rich getting richer. Most people thought I was crazy. They were like, they would never let their customers invest. They would never put their financials on the public display like this. They would never go through this process and audit, like willingly go through these things. And so I was like, you know what, like, let's do it. You know, I'm a little crazy.
Welcome to the Rich and Regular podcast, where we explore life at the intersection of money. I'm Julian.
And I'm Kirsten, and today we're talking to Kim Lewis, who is the CEO and co-founder of Listener Brands, which is home to brands like CurlMix and 4C Only, and just basically brands that are focused on making beauty really simple. Yeah. Talking simple ingredients, simple systems, simple marketing, like just simple, which you know is a key value of mine. I mean, not only is she passionate about clean beauty for curly hair, she's also a little bit of a rainmaker in terms of funding. On top of all of that, her journey has been shaped by some key partnerships, including the one with her husband, Tim, who is also her co-founder and now the chief financial officer of CurlMix. So there's a lot of there. We really enjoyed our conversation with her. She's got one of those journeys where she just checks all the boxes in the entrepreneurship path. And I think what her and Tim are doing is just really rewriting the book on entrepreneurship, couples working together, and creative ways to raise money. So I hope y'all enjoy this episode as much as we did. How are you?
I'm well. How are you guys? Thank you for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here.
We are excited to interview you. We were both talking about how different your story is from ours, and then the parallels, which is just, it's always dope to meet other entrepreneurs that are out here trying to do it, especially ones that work with their spouse, which is
yeah, for sure,
rare, but also so needed.
You need somebody to work for free.
That's it. That's it. What city are you in? Are you traveling right now, or are you at home?
I'm in Chicago, actually. So I go back and forth between Chicago and Atlanta a lot. Where are you guys based?
We're in Atlanta.
Oh, wonderful. Maybe we'll grab coffee.
Yeah, love that.
We are just outside of Atlanta, technically Smyrna, but yeah, it's this is home.
So we're going to try and touch on a couple of different areas in our conversation. But whenever I'm speaking to entrepreneurs, especially with entrepreneurs who are as young as you are, but have as many years in the game, I'm always interested in their origin stories. Did you always know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, or did you have to learn the hard way by going to the traditional workforce first and then realizing you don't want to work for anybody?
Well, that was a tough one. So I had little businesses here and there in high school. So I knew I wanted to be in business because I wanted to make it out the hood. That was the whole goal. But I didn't know what that really meant and what that really looked like. So I went to business school, the University of Illinois, studied there. And then I met this guy he was teaching my entrepreneurship class 101. And I remember he went with the students to Italy and he bought a Ferrari in Italy and had it shipped back to the States.
Wow.
And I was like, where'd they do that at? You know? And then and then I also learned that he was the only professor who did not have a PhD or a higher level degree in the topic. And I was like, oh, so if you're good enough, you don't have to follow these steps. You can just come back and teach it if you just, you're just successful. And so that made me think, okay, I definitely want to be an entrepreneur. I don't know what this looks like, but I definitely know that that's where I want to go. And then I remember getting into the corporate workforce after graduating. I studied supply chain management and marketing. So like logistics, industrial engineering type stuff, because I wanted to make sure I can get a job out of college. Because I knew all the black girls were doing marketing. And I'm like, I ain't gonna be able to get a job if we all compete for the same marketing jobs.
Right.
And I learned they were making like $50K starting out, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to do more than marketing. And I got my first job out of it, was a district manager in training at a grocery chain. And
Aldi?
My manager told me I was terrible every day. I'm sorry?
Was it Aldi?
It was Aldi. It was Aldi. How'd you know? Did you look at my story or you just guessed?
Nah, I didn't. But the moment you said you were talking about your college years and you said district manager, because I know they were recruiting heavy for those roles. And that was my intro to Aldi. And I'd never thought about it. And I only know one other person who's done it. But as soon as you said that, I was like, I bet you it was all that. Because they had a heavy college recruitment.
Well, I was thinking Target because that's who got me.
No,
Target
she said
also.
grocery chain.
I know. As soon as she said grocery chain, I was like, okay, maybe not Target. But when you said supply chain, I was like, oh, I wonder if she got the same recruiting bug I did and ended up at Target.
Oh man, and my manager would told me I sucked at my job every day, and I don't think I sucked. I was getting there on time. I was like, but they wanted you. If you were supposed to be there at 6 a.m., you're supposed to get there at 5 a.m. If the store wasn't in tip top shape by 6 o'clock and they needed help, you were supposed to stay. And I was like, I've been here 12 hours. Like,
right.
I'm going home. Like, and they were not feeling it. I was like, this is a slave ship. Like, this is ridiculous. And so, I just knew it wasn't for me. And so I remember calling Tim. I had worked there 90 days and I was crying. I had carpal tunnel. I didn't have carpal tunnel before, but after I worked at that job, I had carpal tunnel. And I remember telling my manager that I'm like, yo, I have carpal tunnel. And I do think it runs in my family, but I think working in the stores and stocking the freezers without wrist protection triggered it. So I couldn't even do my hair. Like my hands would be numb from elbow to fingertip for hours, like 10 to 12 hours. You know, you get that numb feeling where like your arms and things are tingling and it lasts like a minute or two. Imagine it lasting all night long, you know?
That's scary.
And it is scary. It was like, is my arm gonna cut off? You know, and I couldn't have my hand above my head for longer than like 2 minutes. And so it was and I told my manager and he was just like, you don't have carpal tunnel, you're too young. And I was like, that's enough. And now what I know now, I should have applied for workers' comp, but I didn't know that. I was 21 and I was like, I got to get out of here. I can't stay here. And I remember calling Tim on my way home from work, or my way to work for some big meeting. And I was crying. I was like, I really want to quit. I don't want to work here anymore. I can't do this. And at the time I was reading 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. And I was like, I want to travel. I want to, do all this other stuff. I was like, let's do this, And so this is back in like 2014, I want to say, 2013, 2014. And so after that began our whole foray into entrepreneurship and trying to figure it out. And that's when I signed him up to be a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And he ended up winning $100,000, put $25,000 into my first business. It failed, but I consider it my MBA. I learned a lot. And then it kind of helped us eventually launch CurlMix.
I love it. There's a lot in between that eventually though, right? Because like that wasn't the only failure. I'm not trying to rub it in because I actually like that excites me as another entrepreneur. When you're in it, we literally just closed the business that we started. I mean, it was dead on arrival. I mean, it was just tough. Like we were just doing way too much. The pandemic, like funding, didn't have the bandwidth. Like it was a failure, right? But we learned a lot about ourselves. We learned a lot about like how fast things moving. It was a tech-based business, all that stuff. But I want to stick with the eventually that you talked about because there were several moves that you made, right? You started one thing, it didn't work out. You started another thing, you need to do that thing a little bit differently before you eventually got to CurlMix. When you look back on all of that, like how do you know the difference between just a flat out failure and an opportunity to maybe stick with it but do it a little bit differently, right? Like what's the difference to you between a failure and like a pivot?
Ooh, that's a good question. No one's ever asked me that. They always ask, how do you know you need to pivot? I clearly know we need to pivot. But how do you know when it's an all-out failure? Okay, so this is how I knew. Well, I think that's a choice, right? I think the failure or pivot comes from how hard you're willing to work to fix it. Because a pivot just says, I think there's still some life in this and I really want to make this work. A failure is, this is bad and I don't want to fix it. You know what I'm saying? Like, so for example, when we were doing the do-it-yourself box, right, for CurlMix, it started like as a Blue Apron for hair kind of box. We would send people all the materials to make their own products, and they would, make hair butters and lotions and all the things. And our margins, I had a call with a friend who ran a hair care business, and she told me that the margins in the industry were 80 to 90% for a $20, $30 product. And I was like, wow, I'm selling my box for $30, and my margins are 30%. And I was like, this is not good. Even if I could scale this, I shouldn't because I'll never be able to compete with the other bottles on the store shelves because they're getting $3 for every $1 I'm getting, right? So that's okay. I need to definitely not do this box anymore. So that means I could either try to charge $100 for this box to be on an even playing field, and I was like, there's no way people are going to spend $100 on this box. Like, there's no way. So that means that the box business doesn't work, right? So that technically was a failure, but I turned it into a pivot because I still had customers who were willing to pay me. I just need to figure out what their real problem was they were willing to pay me 90% margin for. And our best-selling box was our flaxseed gel. And I was like, I wonder if we could make this in a ready-made product and still charge them $30 for it, would they still buy it from me? And that is how I can get to my 80 to 90% margins to be competitive in the industry. And so it was a failure, but I turned it into a pivot. And I think that is all in the eye of the beholder and the willingness of the founder.
I love that.
I like that.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about your education, because you mentioned, I read several interviews and listened to several podcasts just in preparation for this conversation. And you've mentioned several times the books you've been reading, the podcasts you heard, or the mastermind you joined, or how you learned what to Google at an expo. And I'm curious if you have found the fact that you are really good at being self-taught and that you have this curiosity that fuels itself. Have you found that to be an advantage in your entrepreneurial journey, or are there things that you wish you had formal training on?
Ooh, that's a good one. If I could go back, I'm moving to a better internet space. I can stop buzzing out on you guys. I wish I had a finance degree. I wish if I could go back to business school, I wish I had studied finance, because that's the thing. Ultimately, your business comes down to what it is on paper. That's it. That is it. What do your books say? And a lot of us are drawn into entrepreneurship, the allure of building something ourselves, creating our own schedule, the ego of serving customers and feeling good about it. And, it feels like meaningful work. But if your books are trash, it does not matter. Nobody wants that business. And that means you can't sell it and you can't get anything from it. And the thing is, most of us don't have any formal training on accounting, forecasting, financial, we just don't know. That wasn't something I learned seriously until maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and I'm in year 10 of entrepreneurship. Right. And so the formal training that I feel like I was lacking was a financial education on the books of the business. And I wish I could go back and learn.
Are you still a reader? Do you still read books now for business advice, or have you found that those have kind of timed out?
I definitely still read books for business advice. I was reading them a lot more in the last few years. These books I'm reading lately are about profit. So they're about what it takes to get to profit, what happens to the businesses that don't, just what does it look like? And so I'm reading, I think it's called Straight Talk. Have you guys read that book before?
No, but I've heard about it.
One of my mentors, Ezra Firestone, he's on my podcast recently on More Rounds. He runs several businesses that do anywhere from 10 to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. He sold one of his own for more than $50 million. And he runs profitable businesses. And so he recommended that book to me. And I was just like, okay, I'm going to make sure I take some time and read it. And sorry for all this commotion with my
No, it's
video.
Okay. Get adjusted.
I'm about to start moving too.
You do make me want to walk around and talk.
I was like, I kind of like that. It's innovative.
That's the way I naturally talk. So it's much harder to sit still and try to have a conversation.
No, I'm sorry. I'm like, the internet's choppy. I want to make sure I get some good audio. So.
No, it's good.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to ask a selfish question here, because we oftentimes get the question about, how do you find the balance between, working with your husband and I've never heard a great answer. I'm not going to ask this impossible question to you because I think it's one of those things that it kind of never gets old, but at the same time, it's also kind of, in my opinion, a pretty annoying question. But I will ask almost like a B to that question, which is, why do you think so many people who are in a relationship can't imagine working with their partners?
I think a lot of people marry it depends. It depends. Because I would say my friends who are getting married post 35, they're marrying for, do you have these boxes that you've checked? But I would say my friends who got married in their 20s are marrying for love. I was like, I'm just so in love with this person, and da, da, da. And I think when you marry for love, then you may not marry somebody who is like the ideal business partner for you. Right. You marry somebody who makes you feel good, but maybe somebody who can't necessarily show up in the ways that you need for work. But I do think the folks who get married in their mid to late 30s, those people, they can go into business together because they really more married. Do you check this box? Do you understand this? How is your credit? Do you make good decisions? All these different things. So I think those are two different types of marriages. Yeah. But remind me of the question to make sure I'm answering it accurately.
Yeah. So, I know you guys are high school sweethearts, right? You met when you were 15 or 16?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so we get the question all the time around how do you find a balance between working together and your marriage and like the two getting blended. And I just honestly, I'm never satisfied with our response. I'm not going to expect you to come up with some poetic way of answering what I think is an impossible question. But I was looking at it from another perspective and wondering why you think so many people can't imagine ever working with or starting a business or maintaining a successful business with their partner.
What I also learned too? People don't fight fair in their marriages sometimes. Like there are rules, right? Like I remember when we were in counseling, the rule was like don't go below the belt. So if you know your partner is sensitive about their weight, don't call them fat in the argument. If you know your partner is sensitive about their intelligence, don't say anything like call them stupid or say, well, you don't read very much, and like you know what I mean. Like, but people don't fight fair. So that's one. But then two, they also don't communicate their real feelings. And I think when you have a business relationship, a good one anyway, everything's out on the table. Everything. Like there's no, well, I don't want to tell you this because of that. Because it's like, well, what are you not going to tell me about the bills that we have due or the taxes that we didn't pay? Like you really got to be able to just lay it all on the table. And I don't think people really do that in their marriages. I think there's a lot of stuff that people don't talk about because they don't want to hurt the other person's feelings or they don't want to make them feel like they're going to leave or just there's just a lot that people just don't talk about. So people definitely should go to counseling. I recommend that. Therapy and or like just like somebody, a marriage coach or whatever, somebody to help you talk honestly about your stuff because people just they don't. And I think you can't go into business with somebody like that. You cannot. And I only think the reason that Tim and I have been good at working together is because I am a lay it all out there kind of person. Like I'm not gonna try to hurt you. I'm gonna do my best not to hurt you, but I'm gonna tell you the truth even if it hurts. And so I remember one of my coaches, she was like, Kim, you got to learn how to like communicate with your team. I think you share too much. And I was like, what? What you mean? She's like, imagine if your mom is losing the house. Your mom's not going to tell you we're losing the house. She's going to say we're downsizing. I was like, well, that's the difference because my mama would have told me we're losing the house. Okay. And
Right.
we got to move. And I think those are just different kind of leaders. And I don't think people function like that in their marriages. And they definitely wouldn't function like that with their partner as their business partner. Now, if you got one of them marriages where y'all literally do talk about any and everything and you know for sure, don't go off what you tell other people because people don't tell people that they don't talk about everything, but they know, well, I didn't tell them this and I didn't tell them that.
Right.
If you got one of them marriages where y'all talk about everything, y'all probably can go into business together, but if you don't, then you don't.
I agree with that because we talk quite a bit. We talk a lot. I only know it because we listen and speak to other couples and we're almost like shocked by how little they converse. Like we talk all the time. We always even talk about like, even when we're home, like obviously our home is organized in a way where I can be on one side and she's on the other. And then when we're working together, we meet in the middle. Our son can be off in his own little world. But like when we're together, we're typically all together, enjoying time and everyone's company and talking and those kinds of things. So I agree. It sounds simple, but like that communication skill is not only important, but it's something that compounds over time and it has an effect on every aspect of your life, your business, your marriage, all that stuff. So
the average couple only spends 2 hours a day together. And I think couples who work together spend anywhere from 4 to 6, which deepens the relationship, but also I think can hurt it too because there's no mystery and curiosity. And curiosity is the epicenter of eroticism. So if you know everything about your partner, their day, what they did, what they ate, they're like, what are you talking about at dinner? You know what I mean? So like, it doesn't leave room. And then if you go out on a fancy date night, well, y'all still talking about the same thing. So like, I do think that is the danger of working together. And this is after being married for the last 15 years, or with my partner for the last 15 years, and realizing, well, if the average couple is spending 2 hours a day together and we spend like 6, and we've had a 30 to 45 year marriage,
Yeah. We say that too. We use the same math. And actually, I spend more time thinking of ways that we can be apart in really useful and creative ways so that you have something different to tell your spouse, whether it's a different story, an experience, something you watched, so that the conversation becomes interesting, right? Like sometimes we do things together, but we also make it a point that he watches different things. He has his own login to Netflix so that his algorithm can be curated to him. I make sure to go out with my friends and, just it's counterintuitive compared to a lot of the ways that couples work where they are actively trying to find ways to spend time together. We do that, but we don't really have to.
Agreed. Well, that's dope.
So do y'all ever have challenges balancing, or did you in the beginning, maybe is a better way of stating it, did you ever have challenges in the beginning managing the balance between your personal finances with the financial demands of a really fast growing business that required a lot of ingredients and upfront costs? Was that ever a challenge for you all in your marriage?
Oh my God, we made all the mistakes. We ended up with $100,000 in credit card debt. Like, like, for real. And we are just getting to paying that off this year. Though
Yeah.
and we accumulate that, I want to say in 2019, 2018.
Yeah.
It was like, yeah. And it was like before we ever got our first funding, like that was our first funding. So Tim worked a good tech job. We were able to acquire a good amount of credit, and then we used it all for the business. And I think looking back, we would have done things differently, where he would have continued working his job instead of quitting entirely and coming to work in the business. And we would have paid off that credit card debt sooner, or consolidated it sooner, versus kind of ignoring it for a little while. And we only paid ourselves like $60,000 that year. So we went from making $250 a year to $60,000 a year, which meant that really only covered mortgage. It was mortgage and maybe some food, but it wasn't covering much. And that's how we ended up with all that credit card debt. And so definitely some junior green mistakes. Not something I recommend to other people, but it was definitely a challenge for sure. And then I fundraised, and that helped us get back to our more a comfortable place of living. But we still had to manage that credit card debt, and I didn't do a good job of tracking those expenses, so that when I did get funding, I could pay myself back from that. So that would be my recommendation. And this is why books are so important. Again, and I told you, if I could go back to college, I would have spent more time. I would have got a finance degree, but I was too intimidated to get a finance degree because it seemed like only the kids who came from the smart suburban schools up north in Chicago were getting the finance degree, and I didn't have that kind of math background. But I think it just would have served me so much better, because I would have kept good, detailed track of what we spent, so that when we did get funding, I could make sure I could either pay myself or have the business pay for that debt. So anyway, so many lessons learned there for sure.
I'm curious along those lines, what is your, I don't want to say relationship, but level of comfort with debt now, right? Because you've seen it on both sides. You've seen it as an entrepreneur. You've seen it, on a personal side with credit card debt. What team are you on? Because obviously in the personal finance world, it's for whatever reason, it's you're either absolutely no debt and you want no part of it, or you have a bit of an understanding and an appreciation for entrepreneurship and you understand that debt is leverage. Are you on one side of the extreme or somewhere in the middle? Where do you fall?
Oh, I definitely think people should have some debt. There's no way you should be using all your cash for certain things. And I say that because we carry inventory. So you can spend all your cash on inventory and then have no access to capital, which you would need to. You never know what comes up, right? Whether it's a tax bill from California, or and they take your payroll instead of taking the cash that you had set aside or whatever, or if there's an opportunity and you want to be able to go on Good Morning America and do the Deals and Steals program, or you want to be able to do you always need some cash available. So I would much rather have a low interest debt or a low interest debt vehicle than to just have all my money tied up in cash, right? And investors want you to have some kind of access to some debt, so that you're not using all their investment dollars to basically just pay off bills. You know what I'm saying? Yes, I'm definitely team debt. Now, personally, we will be debt free this year, so I'm happy about that. Thank you. But I definitely apply for some credit cards because it helped your overall portfolio. I'm gonna be responsible this time, okay?
I mean, you paid it off. Technically, that's responsible.
Thank you. So I think you should have some debt. I just think it needs to be responsible. You need to be responsible and manage. And what I would say is, if you're not a person who is good at being accountable for those things, having someone to keep you accountable with that debt is helpful. So I would say a CFO, or an accounting agency that is working with you, or your COO if they're better at paying their bills than you are. Because a lot of entrepreneurs, we're just really comfortable with risk. So we are happy to not look at the debt and not look at it and pretend like it doesn't exist. But I have someone on my team who's more type A than me and more budget conscious than me. And it's Kim, this bill needs to be paid today. We can't sit on it. We have money in the bank. We should pay this bill. And I'm like, okay, fine. But if it's up to me to pay the bills, I don't want to pay no bills. Because I like to pay money in the bank, So I'll end up being late on a bill just because I wanted to keep it in the bank longer. And it is so dumb and it makes no sense. But that has been so I have someone to help me with my accountability, with making sure we're paying bills on time and we're managing our debt and making smart decisions. Now, I don't like the Shopify debt, right? Where it's like 17% interest. I don't like those payday advance type loans, those revenue-based financing loans. To me, those are like bad forms of debt. And you really only take those if you know you got a big lump sum of cash coming in within a very short period of time.
Yeah.
But not money you have to go and make. We have to go and get sales to get. So I do not recommend that debt. Low interest, couple percentage points, longer payback periods. I'm talking in the years, not in the months. That's to me good business debt.
Yeah, I completely agree. I want to switch and talk a little bit about funding because I think it just helps with the context of the debt conversation and even the businesses that you run because when you got your first $1 million year, I believe you guys went on Shark Tank and you actually turned down the deal, which is something that most entrepreneurs can't imagine. It's a bold move, but you had your reasons. And so I want to go back to that moment when you were on Shark Tank. What was the thought process and how did it shape your approach to funding and even growing your business without that traditional investment from one of the sharks?
So when we went on Shark Tank, I had just gone through Northwestern's executive MBA program and I had learned about BATNA, which is a better alternative to negotiating an agreement. So if me and the sharks can't come to an agreement, what's going to be my backup, right? What's my hard line for saying yes or no? And you need to know that before you go into any negotiation, right? What deal would you not say yes to? Because otherwise you'll end up with something that you're not happy with. I also interviewed several of the other participants who have been on the show over the course of 6 months. So if you were on the show and you had a product-based business, I was calling you, texting you on Instagram, LinkedIn, all the things. So I finally got on the phone with a few people, and I had one girl was saying that she had taken a royalty deal, and it was the worst decision she ever made because she's like, I'm paying one of the sharks, and I don't even pay myself.
Wow.
I was like, dang. And then, them people don't need her money. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
And I was like, oh, I can't be doing that. Okay, that's one. Another person that was like, yeah, your episode will do well if you go up first, and if you really cry, you'll definitely go up first. And it was like, if you're a really good story, and if you don't, you'll go at the end. And if you go at the end, like you're like the 5th episode in the series, it won't do well. And I was just like, okay, good to know. So you got to put on the show. Like it was just I was learning all these different things. And then when we got on the show, I knew that I didn't want to give it more than 15% of the company, like because I knew we were gonna have to raise again, and I was like, and they had already told us that our valuation was too high. We originally had a $7 million valuation. We were communicated that we needed to bring it down because the sharks weren't even going to hear our message. We brought it down to 4. And I was like, at that point, we were going to make $1 million that year. So if you're making $1 million, you could pretty much go and get a term sheet from an investor for a $6 to $7 million valuation. Like that's just standard. Mm-hmm. Bringing it down to the 4 was a discount for the sharks. When we got on the show, Robert Herjavec's offer for 20% of the company, $400,000, brought it down to $2 million.
Oh, wow.
And that's I was like, okay. And I also had just seen the episode from the Ring founder where he was on the show asking for a $6-7 million valuation, and they laughed him off the show. Yeah. Literally. And I think he was going to be a guest judge that season 2. And I was like, you know what? I was like, this is going to be our story. I can already see it. And they were wrong about him. And I was like, and so I'm happy that the sharks don't know everything, And so Robert was like, I don't know anything about the industry, but I'll give you $400,000 for 20%. And I was like, yeah, no. To me, it was an easy no after that, He would not budge. And so I was just like, we could go to a bank for that, like, or a novel investor for that. We need a partner in this. And he didn't want to be that. So I was like, it made sense,
Yeah. Did your appearance on the show change the trajectory of your business at all? Did you feel an impact immediately after?
Yeah, we definitely had an increase in sales. I would say that month. We were running a lot of ads though too. So we probably made a couple $100,000 from the appearance for sure.
Wow. That's great. That's great.
Thank
you. You mentioned crowdfunding earlier. I want to talk a little bit about that. But first, can you just explain what that is to some of our listeners who may not know exactly what that is? And then the second part of that question is, why is that such an important part of the way that you're now running Listener Brands?
So after we went on Shark Tank, or just before that, no, after we went on Shark Tank, we had gotten up to maybe like $5 million in revenue. So we did $1 million the year we filmed, $5 million the year we aired. And I went and I got a $1 million investment from the former CEO of LinkedIn, Jeff Weiner. And I went out to raise my $5 million seed round or Series A or whatever. Or I guess it's a seed round, seed round. And the investors were like, we want to see more. And I was like, well, what more do you want to see?
Right.
Because I'm over here, I got $100,000 credit card debt I have not paid off. I put this $1 million into the business. We got to 5 million in revenue. And, you know, granted, our brand needed some work at the time. But to me, that was the whole point. Like, if we needed work, then, like, money would fix that and we would be doing even more money. So, and I was like, you know what? I have 100,000 customers. I can raise my own investment. And so, essentially, you asked about crowdfunding. Crowdfunding, most people know crowdfunding through the likes of, like, Kickstarter and Indiegogo and GoFundMe, where people can donate to your campaigns. And Kickstarter, they typically get a reward, right? That's called rewards-based crowdfunding. Well, in 2012, the Obama Jobs Act allowed for non-accredited investors, so people who, everyday, you know, citizens who maybe make $50,000 a year, could become angel investors for as little as $100. And that didn't exist before then. But the rules were that you could only raise up to $1 million, right? And in the pandemic in 2020, they changed the regulation, well, technically 2021, around April 1st, from $1 million to $5 million. And I was like, oh, this is interesting, because you have to go through an audit. You have to do, it's a lot of legal work. It's a lot of financial diligence that goes in it, because you're raising money from the public. So there's a lot of rules with the SEC, the Security Exchange Commission, on raising this money from the public. And when the regulation went from 1 million to 5 million, I was like, well, now this is interesting, because it's the same level of work to get the 1 million as just the 5, you know? And so I was like, I would rather my customers own equity in the business than these corporations or these institutions or these people who are already rich getting richer. And I was like, my customers, you know, they could put in $250, and maybe if we sell for a higher multiple, they could get back $500 or $750 or $1,000. And I would much rather the money be in their pockets than like somebody else's. And so I was like, we have 100,000 customers. We can raise our own investment. And so most people thought I was crazy. They were like, they would never let their customers invest. They would never put their financials on the public display like this. They would never go through this process and audit, like willingly go through these things. And so I was like, you know what, like, let's do it. You know, I'm a little crazy. So in 2021, we allowed our customers to invest, and we raised about $4.5 million from them.
That's incredible.
Thank you. And that following year, we got the business to 10 million in revenue. So in 2022.
Wow.
And thank you. And so this time around, I went back out to fundraise. People are like, why are you still fundraising? Brands raise tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's not like, oh, she fundraised already, she doesn't need it again. It's like, this is a continual process. You know what I mean? Until you decide, I don't want to raise anymore, and I just want to focus on profit and growth and sell the business. And so this is like my last crowdfund. We have one live right now. We've raised about $1 million, 1.1 million so far. We're going to close it on April 1st, and we're going to allow a few thousand more folks to invest, and that'll be the last chance. And then once we do that, I'm just going to focus on getting the business to scale. So 30 million in revenue is my goal. And once we kind of get there, then the acquirers start looking out. They start saying like, oh, you're doing 30 million in revenue, you're profitable, blah, blah, blah. Like, we're interested in acquiring you. And you can typically see multiples from anywhere from 3 to 5x revenue, as long as you have 10 to 15% EBITDA or profitability. And so that's my goal and my focus right now.
So is that the point when investors would see a return, is if the company is ever acquired, they would participate in that? Okay.
Acquisition or IPO. But IPOs are typically funding events and not liquidity events. So, you know, someone buying the company is acquisition. IPO is like, we want to offer more shares to the public and let them buy shares so we can get more funding to grow the business. So both options are available. I'm not counting either one out, just because I want to make sure more than anything that I return money to my crowd. So, you know, and I can't promise any results, right? So like, this is still investing. We could still die. You could still lose your money, like, because we are in business, and that's just the fact of the matter. But all my money's in CurlMix, so I'm trying to make sure we get a return. I'm trying to make sure we get to that 30 million plus with the multiple of 5x, and hopefully I can return, you know, a 3x to folks in the crowd. So that's what I'm working on.
Do you find that most of your investors are actually customers, or do you attract some outside people that are really interested in the numbers and the opportunity that you created?
Both. The larger checks are from folks who are just like, I love the opportunity. You know, I may or may not be a customer, but they'll put in 25,000 or 10,000. And then the majority of the folks who've invested the thousands, those are customers. Those are customers who's like, I believe in CurlMix. I want to see it continue to thrive. I want to see it around. I want you guys to be successful, and I want to own a piece of it. And so some of them are like, I just want to donate. I'm like, y'all are funny. Y'all are funny. But yeah, so both.
So in all of your raises, whether it's through traditional investors or through crowdfunding, is there something that you've learned that most people wouldn't realize about fundraising? Because I think there's two sides or two schools of thought that people think about. One is just asking a lot of people. It's a numbers game, and you just have to have the persistence to keep asking. And then there's another school of thought that says, you know, it's a network game, and if you know the right people, you really only need to ask, you know, the right people for the right thing at the right time. Do you fall somewhere in those two camps, or is there another insight that you've picked up from raising all of this money?
Most people worry about the actual raising of it, but they really need to worry about the financial piece. Most people's books are not in good enough shape to be audited, and that's the reality. And then the thing is, even when you get ready to go crowdfund and you get this audit, the audit ain't cheap. So they think they're going to pay $500 for an audit. And it's like, no, ma'am. Even if you're getting an accounting review, and that's all you need for $1 million, right? A review is going to be a few $1,000s. So you have to pay the accounting firm before you crowdfund.
Oh, wow.
Right. And like people are usually, they come to crowdfunding once it's like a last resort. Yeah. And it's like, it's not a last resort type of thing. It's something that still needs 6 months of planning. You know what I mean? And you got to line up dominoes of like relationships and people who are willing to share it and press and all the things. So it's still a lot of work. It's just a different way of going about getting capital. You get more control over crowdfunding. That's the only big difference, is more control, but it's still a lot of work. And then when it comes to actually getting people to invest, this is where I liken crowdfunding to being like a politician. It's about shaking hands and kissing babies. You know, and you're doing that online. The way you shake hands and kiss babies online is you're responding to every comment. You're posting every day on social. You're sending emails and SMS. You're posting on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook. Like, you're like, my job has been to be a content creator for the last 2 months, not the CEO. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And most people don't have a crowd and they want to crowdfund. Like, if you don't already have a base of customers, you should not crowdfund. If you already don't have a base of audience online, you know, where you're posting on social and they're engaged, you should not crowdfund. And so I actually don't recommend tech companies do this. I really only think it's for product-based businesses who've been around for a little while, and they have an audience who love them, and they just like, I want to support you. But if you don't have those things, then like, I don't recommend crowdfunding for those kind of companies. Yeah, now, there are some people who just have big, small checks of individuals. This person wants to put in 20K, this person wants to put in 100K, and I need a vehicle to collect all of their money, and they can use a WeFunder or whatever. But they can use a WeFund or whatever. But the thing is, if you already have those checks, those people want to commit to you, I would not go through a platform, because you're going to pay 5 to 7% to the platform. Right. You know what I mean? And so if it's just about who you know, do a special purpose vehicle, wrap up the round yourself, pay the attorney fees yourself. It's going to be cheaper than going through a platform.
Right.
Good to know. Good to know. Because I think most people are more familiar with the platforms, and they would go right there for the ease of it, but they're not necessarily thinking about how much they might be able to save, particularly in a case like this. Like, every dollar counts. So I appreciate that tip. If you're anything like us, you probably have done hundreds of podcast interviews. I know you have your own platform. You're interviewing people as well. But I'm focused just on you right now. What's the question that you wish people would ask, but they just aren't asking? Like, they just keep forgetting it, or they don't know to ask it. But like, what is I'm sure there's an answer to something, or a story or something that you wish that you could answer, but nobody's asked the question. What is that question? And then what's the answer?
You mean asking me, right? Directly?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a tough one. What do I wish people would ask? I don't have anything I wish people would ask, but I wish people would do, like, put in the effort. Like, a lot of people want to talk to you because it makes them feel like, you know, it's like, I want to talk to this person. If I just talk to them, I'll be further along in my journey. And that's usually not the case. Like, I coach, so I don't coach people, right? But I did it for a small window last year. I was like, you know, I had to put my money in payroll. I was like, I'm going to coach for like a month. just to make up, supplement my income. And I'd have maybe 4 or 5 students, and I would give them a directive. Say, hey, do this. When we come back next week, it should be done. When we come back next week, wasn't done, right? Only 1 of the 5 people did it. And then I was like, okay, we're going to fix our landing pages. Go back, clean up your landing page, put your offer high, make sure reviews are here, da-da-da-da. And she's like, and, you know, come back, landing page, only 1 person did it. And I was like, okay, you're paying me thousands of dollars to coach you. and you won't do the things that I'm asking you to do, right? But you want me to show up and teach you for 45 minutes, but not actually complete the exercise. And I'm like, there's a difference between coaching and a difference between like holding someone's hand along the way, right? Like if a coach shows up to coach a team and the players aren't putting in the effort, then like that team can't win. It doesn't matter how good the coach is, right? And then if the team comes but they have no direction, no objective perspective, all the things, but then versus a teacher, it's very different. A coach and a teacher are very different things. A teacher is going to handhold you. They're going to, I'm sure, to give you advice and this and that. And I was just like, I don't like this. I don't like this. I want to help people who are already putting in a certain level of effort. And so I don't really have questions that I wish people asked. I just wish people showed up for themselves the way that they communicate that they want. You know what I'm saying? Like the success they say that they want. I don't feel people actually really want it. And I hate saying that. But I was just like, this is why the coaching industry is what it is. You know what I'm saying? When people are like, only 10% actually go through the downloads and 10%
Correct.
go through the books, but they're spending $10,000 to feel like they're moving forward, even when they're not. Anyway, that's my personal side. It's like questions. It's just like my personal gripe.
No, you're not wrong.
You are not wrong, and you are not alone in that feeling. I tell people all the time. First of all, this is part of the reason why we don't, despite several requests to do so, offer coaching. We might be able to do it. I couldn't do it on my own because I don't have the time or the temperament for it. I mean, I get frustrated at my son in Little League. Like, I don't have the temperament for it. You told me you want to ball, so we going to ball. If you're not balling, then I don't know what we're doing. I tell people, especially when I'm talking to someone that I believe is a qualified professional, and we're talking about making that leap or making the jump from working in corporate to coming into entrepreneurship, I always ask them, like, sometimes I just read back, and I'm going to give this little tip to you. Go to their LinkedIn page and read that to them. It's like, I thought you said you were a
change agent,
revolutionary, revenue obsessed, like
storyteller,
get it done kind of person. Is this not you? Is this a fake profile? Because this is who you said you were, right? This is what you're communicating to other people. Like, 'cause this is who I thought was showing up on this call. But no, I get it. I think, and the last thing I'll say is I think we owe it to ourselves just to be a little bit more honest about that. Because I think right now, you know, like I totally understand why people are saying like entrepreneurship is being glamorized and all that stuff. But like, there's also a good bit of like people that are just scared, right? Like we have just allowed fear to completely overwhelm us. And for me, I would say us, this cohort of talented and well-resourced and well-connected people, I just kind of don't feel like we should have as much fear as we do, right? Like we've got more resources than any generation before us. And it seems like so many of us just still allow fear to consume us and to dictate our decisions and our thinking. So I would, my only, stay with that energy. Like, don't let that discourage you unless you need some more quick cash. And
No, I'm done. I'm good.
why not get some coaching dollars?
I was raising money and my check was taking longer to come in from my investors. And so that's why I needed the quick money. I was like, okay, I need to cover payroll. And I'm like, well, how am I cover my stuff? I was like, I'll coach. I was like, oh, this is not for me. You're right. I don't have the temperament. Because you got to be somebody who, you almost have to be like pastoral in a way.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
To get what make them want to believe in themselves and make them want to do. And I'm like, my coach that I hired for me, she tell me what to do and I go do it because I pay her money. And I don't want to be back on this next call and be like, yeah, I just spent this couple $1,000s and I didn't do the work you told me to do on the last calls. I'm going to waste your time and my time on this next. I don't do that.
Yeah.
But also I'm affiliated, right? Like I've made this investment. I showed up. I got dressed.
Yeah.
I took a shower. Like, you know, I got out the house. Like I was excited. I did pre-work. I did the pre-work.
Yeah.
Like how I do the pre-work and you not do the pre-work. So yeah, that gets me. So I hear you.
Okay, this is my last question because I don't want to. I was about to rant, and I was like, let me not end on a rant about effort and coaching.
You can double down.
My question is about how your relationship with money or your approach to managing money has changed throughout this journey because you've thrown out some big numbers. I mean, at this point, I think I saw on your Instagram, you guys have done over $32 million in sales, which is massive. You've raised over $10 million. You've got 100,000 customers who are willing to open their wallets and believe in your brand so much that they became investors. not all 100,000, but a good portion of them, a portion of them became investors. And I'm just curious, has anything about your relationship with money or scarcity or abundance or anything, has anything changed throughout this journey because of the way that you've kind of led your entrepreneurial path?
Absolutely. So one, I'll tell you, I've never been someone who spends on luxury things. So I do not own a pair of red bottoms. I do not own. I have one designer bag that was $200, and I felt like that was expensive buying. That's like, but I needed something nice to go to one of these balls. So I was like, okay, I'll buy this little $200 bag in Nordstrom Rack. So I don't spend there. Now that being said, I did spend $30,000 in a month in Cape Town with my family. For, and I wanted my boys to travel to Africa. I wanted us to be comfortable while we were there. And we had a phenomenal time. And I started the business really to travel. That was the only, but then I started it and then we stopped traveling because it got so busy and it was so much work. And it was like, how do we build $1 billion startup? And I was like, wait, we were just trying to make $1 million a year and like live as nomads. How do we get to this $1 billion startup? Where did we, And I recently went to Kenya with some girlfriends who are entrepreneurs. Jewel raised, I don't know, almost $100 million in her fund. Tracy is a multi-million-dollar apparel brand. Somebody else was an executive. I went on a trip with like some fancy folks, and we spent 10 days in Kenya doing the most amazing activities: hot air ballooning, the safari. We were close up on the lions. I'm like, they were like 1 or 2 feet from us without windows. Like, it was real. Wow. And I was like, I'm missing out on life in a way because I've been so deep in my business. I'm missing the whole reason we started this. Yes. And it was like, how can I make sure I'm feeding my soul, which is travel, right? But make sure that the business has what it needs and it's still growing profitably over time, and maybe that means I go a little slower. Maybe that means I'm not chasing after these like crazy goals in every single year that I'm maybe it'll take me a little longer. Maybe instead of 2 years to get into 30 million, it might take me 3 to 5, and that's okay. But my relationship with money changed because before it was always about the number. It was always about the number, and I had tunnel vision about the number. And I'm realizing that like this is a game of more, and we already have so much. And so how do you enjoy the much that you have without being blinded by the more? Because then here's what really got me, right? So let's pretend we got to this 30 million in revenue. We sold for $150 million, right? I get my cut. And what are they going to tell me to do with that money once I get it? Y'all already know the answer. What y'all think the answer is? Kim, you get your cut of the $150 million. What you supposed to do next?
You mean like taxes?
After you pay your taxes, what you going to do with the money?
Oh, you're supposed to start another business or become
investor.
Become an angel investor or something.
To do what? To get what? More.
Yeah. As soon as you free up some time, we're supposed to spend money on buying things that create more blocks of our time. Like that's the way it works.
And don't that sound like a scam?
It is a scam. This is why we created Rich and Regular, because it's like you can be as rich as possible and as regular as possible, but you just got to know what your enough is before you get started, because otherwise you're exactly right. You cash out and then you buy this house that requires all of your time to take care of, or you get this car that requires all of your energy to maintain. And it's just like, you missed the point. You missed the point.
We are trying to figure out how to return a multiple to our investors with a CurlMix, for sure. That's number one priority. And then still live the lives that we had intended before we started this business, which was learning another language, traveling abroad, making sure I babysit Africa, like getting into art, like seeing our family and friends, having parties, not being like, oh, this job and this business is all that I can. And it's you get brainwashed. And I didn't realize how brainwashed we were until I was in Kenya. And I'm like, these people don't know my business. These people don't know. These people don't know anything about what I got going on. And it makes me just feel like, oh my God, I am a little brainwashed and I have tunnel vision. And like, I need to have a global perspective. So my relationship with money has changed from that. It's not about the number. It's about the what you're going to do with that number. Yes. It's the what and not the money.
Yeah. It's amazing how Mama Africa has that effect on all of us. That was where our aha moment came too. We were in South Africa
specifically in Cape Town.
Yeah. We were in Cape Town for our honeymoon and had a similar realization about our corporate jobs. It wasn't about this business, but it was just like, man, this is what matters. I need to build my life that in a way that allows me to have more of this without obsessing over something that no one is going to remember me for anyway.
Yeah.
Like, at that time we were just marketing managers. Like we weren't delivering babies. We weren't doing any sort of life-saving work. It was just, but we were lost.
Yeah, well, you don't know you're lost. You don't know you're lost, right? To your point when you said it earlier, and you were like, man, $250,000 coming in. You are Black excellence personified. You're young. You're sexy. The money is coming in predictably. It feels easy. You can go to work late, leave early if you want to. You can do it with your eyes closed. But at the end of the day, you could probably jot down the same list of all the things that you just said. It's just like replacing it with like, not really fulfilled. I don't really feel challenged. This job isn't what I thought it was going to be. New manager, all those things change. It's never the same. So I don't know what the answer is in terms of like whether we should all just keep on bouncing around, getting the best jobs that we can probably get, or starting a business and then nurturing that thing until we can eventually cash out. But it sounds like you found some balance that works for you. And I think that's all that matters.
Yeah, I've committed to... So I'm still, of course, working full-time in CurlMix and working to make sure I get this return from my investors. But I also want to make sure I'm traveling quarterly like I used to. Like that was a plan. I wanted to spend a week abroad each quarter, and I stopped doing that. And I'm like, of course I had 2 babies and stuff, and that contributed to it too. But I was like, at a minimum, I need to be doing that at a minimum. And in Africa, at minimum once a year. So like that's going to help manage that. And then I have this whole plan for like once we exit, what I'm going to be doing. So, yeah, anyway.
Incredible. Well, Kim, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for all of the knowledge and the wisdom you've given our listeners. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about your story or even try some of your products?
If you want to learn more about my story, you could probably you could go to KimLewisCEO.com and the story's there. But also Kim Lewis CEO on Instagram is where I post every day. And then if you want to check out our crowdfund, wefunder.com/CurlMix. And if you like my hair and you want to wear wash and go or color wax or anything like that, check out CurlMix.com.
Love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
If you like videos like this and want to see more, make sure you click subscribe and turn on notifications.